Welcome to Government Contracting Weekly, sponsored by AOC Key Solutions Incorporated. Government Contracting Weekly is the only television program devoted exclusively to the competitive and dynamic world of government contracting. A world where coming in second place is not an option, but where principle-centered winning is the only approach.
Good morning and welcome to Government Contracting Weekly. I'm Jim McCarthy, the owner of Key Solutions and the host of this show. This morning I am joined by a distinguished panel of experts to discuss the intersection between law enforcement and government contractors. Our conversation will take in the latest trends and the hot issues in law enforcement. Joining me today are Keith Bryars from the Harris Corporation. Welcome and to Government Contracting Weekly.
Thank you, Jim.
Next we have Kay Stephenson, the co-founder and president and CEO of Datamaxx Group. Good morning, Kay.
Good morning.
And last, but not least, we have Joe Trindal, the Chief Operating Officer for Akal Security and the president of InfraGard National Capital Region Members Alliance. Welcome to Government Contracting Weekly. So let's get right to it.
Thank you.
Okay? So the first question I'm going to ask, I'll direct to you, Keith, which is, we're talking about the law enforcement market. Define the law enforcement market for us.
Yeah, so from the federal law enforcement market, it's really defined by the significant agencies, Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security. And within those agencies, you have the components, the FBI, DEA, for example, U.S. Marshal Service in the Department of Justice, and over in the Department of Homeland Security side, for example, Secret Service, Homeland Security investigations. But the common theme, I believe, for all of these agencies is that, first of all, they work together. They have well-defined lanes, but they collaborate and work together. But most importantly for this, they also contract out for goods and services.
And what type of goods and services are generally bought from the, from the industry?
So it's a wide range. It can be mission support, for example. Harris, many people know the Harris Corporation provides handheld tactical radios to state and local first responders. Okay. What they may not know is that a lot of our mission critical networks that we support for federal law enforcement are run and maintained, secured, built, designed by the folks that support these systems that help federal law
So
enforcement.
there's a wide variety of services that
Absolutely.
are procured. Okay, so Kay, well, Keith has defined the law enforcement market, so you tell us, how is business? Is business good?
Business is coming back. You know, after 2008 and the economic downturn, a lot of the budgets were cut by many of the agencies. There was sequestration, but we see it starting to come back. There's more grant money available from the federal agencies. I think that it's getting much, much better.
And I guess that is a good trend that we hope will continue into the rest of the year. There's no question about that. Okay, Joe Trindal, talk to us about some of the hot issues that you perceive in law enforcement.
Well, some of the key issues, I think, are that there's going to be a growing downturn of federal agency budgets and greater reliance then out of that on the private sector and on contracting. Federal Protective Service, for example, contracts about 9,000 security guards. And you contrast that against an agency of about 1,200 sworn law enforcement. So you can see that there's a disproportionate number of contracted support services. When you look at fusion centers and the intelligence, domestic intelligence community efforts, an awful lot of that is supported by contract services. Okay. So that trend is going to continue, simply because it's driven by budget to a great degree.
Okay. And that, by the way, of course, is common to a lot of the different agencies. We've all been experiencing that. So let me ask you, Keith, what would be your main issue that you think is with our law enforcement contracting community?
So I agree. I think budget is a significant driver, but I'll be honest, from my perspective, I think threat is a significant driver. If you look back, just to illustrate, look back to 9/11 and the events and how that changed federal law enforcement, and for the FBI, for example, changed from primarily a federal law enforcement agency and transformed itself to an intelligence-led, threat-driven organization. Department of Homeland Security was stood up post 9/11 to help defend the homeland, so you had all the component agencies brought under one umbrella. I think you see that threat and how that changed the way federal law enforcement looks at the problem and reacts to the problem, and now is proactive with the threat. And I think as we move into the 21st century here, we're going to see cyber really as an emerging threat that is going to have to be almost dealt with the same way counterterrorism was dealt with in the last decade.
Okay. All right, thank you. Kay, your threat, or excuse me, your major issue, I guess, that you perceive.
Well, even with the budget cuts, I think that anybody that's servicing the law enforcement market in general has to be able to adapt to the changes. And one of the big changes now is cloud services. We're providing for most of the agencies that used to be able to buy large licenses and things like that. They've changed, so we've adapted to that, and in 2003 we stood up a secure cloud for law enforcement. And they're subscribing to the services. They don't exactly buy licenses and things like that. I think that all of the people that contract with the federal government need to look at things like that, being able to provide the same level of services, the same quality of services, and do it much more cost effectively.
Okay, so you mentioned cloud, and that made me think about technology and high technology law enforcement, if that's even the right term. My question, how long before we see RoboCop out on the streets? Is that going to happen anytime in the near? No, but seriously, is there going to be a continual evolution of technology, and in what direction?
Absolutely. I think technology is one of the largest drivers behind how you see the evolution of how these federal agencies really attack the threat. Cyber is a great example. So you have a number of companies out there that offer secure products, secure services, but then you have systems integrators like Harris who come in and also collaborate with those secure product providers to put together an end-to-end solution to offer to those customers. So it's also a defensive, and it's also at the same time an offensive tool for law enforcement.
But there's a counter challenge here with respect to the instances of Snowden and that type of challenges, in which individuals, even within government agencies as well as within the contractor companies, can be perceived as a threat, as well as the requirement now to increasingly secure that information that's being placed into a cloud or into a platform that makes it easier. So there's competing concerns here that the government has very strong feelings about, and quite frankly, the private sector is well positioned to address.
That's a great point. Just to follow up on the insider threat.
That's a very important point, if you don't mind, and we're going to come back and talk about the cyber and the insider threat when we return from this commercial break.
I'm Kevin Madden, the Vice President and General Manager of Honeywell's Federal Systems Group, with another government success story. Recently, working with the Corps of Engineers at Rock Island Arsenal, Honeywell began making upgrades at a manufacturing facility for Army equipment, creating improved output and efficiency, energy usage cut by an anticipated 35%, and an annual cost reduction of more than $5 million. As a result, this work required no upfront capital or additional taxpayer dollars. This is accomplished by combining our financial, engineering, and project management support. In fact, Honeywell has helped more than 150 agencies improve core infrastructure and facilities, deploy renewable resources, and trim emissions. Often this is accomplished through guaranteed savings. Your mission is to make the country a better, safer place. Our mission is to help you meet your energy goals and mandates. For more information, visit buildingsolutions.honeywell.com.
So, did we win that government contract?
We did.
And?
And now we've got to deal with the regulatory hurdles.
Well, good luck with that.
When the government's your client, you need to play by their rules.
And the rules change more than you think.
Exactly. We need someone who's done this before. Plus, it's complicated, so we're going with BDO.
BDO?
People who know government contracting know BDO.
Keith, before the commercial break, you were making a point about the insider threat. Would you care to elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. So I think the insider threat, going back to your point, is a great example of how contractors, the industry has to follow the threat and what's going on in federal government and especially with federal law enforcement. So, you look at insider threat, for example, Harris is developing tools to provide to federal law enforcement and the national security community to help them better detect insider threat inside their networks. So that's a good example of how the threat is driving how we're thinking and we're perceiving how we can help and support and partner with the government.
Okay, Kay.
I think there's other things that are going on in the government to help that. The federal agencies now can go through a process, as well as the private sector, called FedRAMP, where they'll come in and certify your solutions, and they're looking for the security aspects of solutions. So if your company is really interested in going into that market and you want to be able to play in that market, I think that you might consider doing a FedRAMP certification for your solutions.
Very well. Okay, Joe, any thoughts on that? Or not? I'd like to ask you this question. I know because I've read some of your reports and your writing that there's been a change in the paradigm for first responders. Instead of sort of first responders, there are now sort of like the first protectors. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Could you talk to us about that?
Well, in 2002, the Brits really launched the protective intelligence, protective policing concept, and that's come over to the United States. And it is such that now, instead of law enforcement, fire, EMS, and emergency management being first responders to an incident, we're now thinking of ourselves more as first preventers. And that is getting ahead of the threat curve and understanding better how to predict the threat. And that a huge part of that is technological analytics that is associated with the technologies that we already have out there, but plugging those analytics in to be able to predict certain potential threat behavior to affect interdictions in advance of the attack itself. And these types of things have proven themselves very, very effective. And when you have a whole of community engagement, such as we saw after the Boston Marathon bombing, you really have a very effective, powerful tool that is public-private sector with a huge degree of concentric, contractor-driven
And it is
elements.
a new paradigm, right?
It is a new
Absolutely.
paradigm,
Okay.
no question.
So a question for any one of you or all of you, which is, let's talk about cybersecurity. What is the private sector's role? What are the government contractors' role in cybersecurity, protecting our critical national assets?
So I think it's very critical. I mean, the nations, we live in a country where we store things on computers, we use computers. You don't have to look too much further than our very own smartphones to know that we all use devices to communicate and talk to each other. And those are all vulnerabilities for us. So we live in a persistent threat environment as far as cybersecurity is concerned, and we have both from nation states, we have threats from criminal organizations, as well as the internal threat we just discussed. Right, right. So when you look at that, I think the contracting community, we can't stand still and wait for these threats to penetrate and cause more harm. The recent data breaches are a great example of this. We've got to be proactive. We've got to go out and help federal agencies, our federal partners in the law enforcement community, be better at detecting those threats, be better at identifying those threats, and then disrupting and dismantling those threats.
Earlier on in the program, Kay was talking about the health of the law enforcement market and how there is some signs that things are finally getting a little bit better. But I'd like to ask the group here, if you could discuss for our audience, what are some of the barriers to entering the law enforcement contracting market? In other words, the contractors face if they're trying to get into business here. Can you go ahead.
Well, I think regrettably there tends to be a perception of us against them attitude among the federal agencies and government in general to contractors. So as opposed to embracing the private sector as true partners toward an agency's mission, there tends to be somewhat of a standoffish perspective, and the strict adherence, of course, to contract statement of work and contract FAR provisions. I think the bridge needs to move toward a greater partnership between the public and private sector within these contracts and strictly within the scope of the contract itself, but make it such that there is a joining or union of the adherence to mission, the agency's mission, the customer's mission. That's key.
Okay. So, Keith, how does a company get into the business if they want to?
So I think understanding the mission is really step one. Understanding what they're about, being able to know really what they're facing. For example, I spent 25 years in the FBI as an agent and understand the mission very well. And I think Harris understands that mission. Harris has built an organization of expertise that they provide to agencies like the FBI, and it helps us come in as a partner, not as a contractor necessarily, although that's what we are to support, but we also come alongside these agencies and bring with it expertise in mission networks and how how to secure things and how to make things better.
Okay, well, good. All right, well, it's that time again to step away for a commercial. When we come back, I want to talk about small businesses and how they can participate in this market. Right? Thank you. Questions. Do you lack win strategy, themes, and discriminators? Are you being outmaneuvered by your competition? Did you get a late start on your proposal? If you answered yes to one or more of these nightmare scenarios, we can help. Hi, I'm Jim McCarthy, owner of Key Solutions. We help government contractors win government contracts. And for over 30 years, KSI has helped clients win or retain over $130 billion in government contracts by providing the keys to winning. We assist companies both large and small to enter the U.S. government contracts market or to increase their market shares. We have worked with 87 of the top 100 government contractors and literally hundreds of small businesses. So if you're chasing a must-win contract opportunity, go to our website, aockeysolutions.com, and click on Win. It's a tough market out there. Don't go it alone.
AFCEA has been bringing government and industry together since 1946. By joining AFCEA, you'll reach the decision makers and become part of the discussion. You'll increase market visibility, gain market insight, receive discounts on AFCEA member services and events, and manage and engage corporate associates. AFCEA is the association of choice. Join today at www.afcea.org.
As you've seen from watching our show, we've begun to produce and air commercials. And the response from prospective advertisers has been very strong for a couple of really smart reasons. First off, advertising in Government Contracting Weekly has virtually no waste. Our audience is made up almost exclusively of contracting executives and procurement officers. If that's your target market, we've got you covered. Secondly, we include commercial production within the reasonable cost of an advertising schedule. And even better, in producing your commercial, we utilize the 30-plus years of experience of Key Solutions, who've helped their clients win over $130 billion in contracts, in part by scoping out and refining the most impactful message. If you'd like to learn more, contact us at governmentcontractingweekly.com and click on Advertise.
Okay, welcome back now. Kay, earlier in the program, Joe was talking about public and private partnership and cooperation. Talk to us about Firstnet and what that means to the contracting community.
What Firstnet means to the contracting community is that there is going to be a broadband LTE interoperable network that's being funded to the tune of $7 billion by the federal government, and it has been a long time coming. This is an opportunity for all people that work in the law enforcement and criminal justice, first responders. It is a interoperable network. They have hired a new board, and a lot of people on that board have a tremendous background in the law enforcement and criminal justice marketplace, and this is a long time coming. This is the end result of the inability to respond at 9/11 and the information sharing that needed to go on that was not there. And I think that it's going to be huge, and it's going to be a collaboration between the public and the private sector, because you have the carriers that are going to be involved. You have the ability to be able to work with different agencies in a manner for a major event, and these things are extremely important.
So $7 billion, that's
the first stage.
That's the first stage only. So obviously there are contracting opportunities that are going to come out of that. Let's talk about a small business for a minute, Keith. If a small business wanted to gain entry into this market, right, what would be the approach?
Great question. So, you know, Harris is a small business mentor, and there are a number of ways for small businesses to partner and team with companies like ours that are considered to be larger companies that don't have some of the hurdles that a small business has. And another example is the GTSC here, the Government Technology Services Coalition, a great example of where we're actually a mentor to small businesses. So I think the barriers that they feel are opening some doors to them coming to us and being partners, and then us gaining a co-level entry into some of the business areas that they like to pursue.
If you were a small business, which you are, and you wanted to expand, how would you go about it nowadays?
Well, I think the key, as you mentioned, is really to link up with larger businesses and to engage in the mentorship programs that are available that certain businesses have, and engage in coalitions such as GTSC. As well as InfraGard and others. It's about networking. Is very important, very important.
Okay.
Yeah, it's critical to network. I think that's one of the key points of being a member of the coalition, because you get to meet different entities within that coalition, and you can leverage off of each other.
Okay, so we asked you all to bring your crystal ball to the table today, so I want to just kind of ask for a quick set of predictions for the law enforcement community, the law enforcement market. Start with you, Keith. What is your one prediction?
So prediction for threat, I would say we're going to continue to see cyber as not only the emerging threat, but as the biggest threat that's going to loom. You'll see resources from all of the federal agencies, but in particular federal law enforcement, will probably either meet or exceed what was put towards counterterrorism in the last decade.
Okay, Kate, your prediction.
I believe that my prediction is going to be about biometrics and how integral that's going to be to future acquisitions.
Joe, your prediction.
Well, I think there's going to be a growing public-private partnership and collaboration, because law enforcement agencies, no matter how well they may be funded, can't do it alone. And the private sector is a huge, huge portion of that. And when you consider that 85% of the nation's critical infrastructure is private sector owned, there's no question that there has to be greater collaboration. And those steps are already taking place in every department.
All right, well, we're going to step away for another commercial break. And when we come back, I'm going to ask you for your final thoughts on this whole subject, okay? Thank you.
Since 1941, the USO has been lifting the spirits of America's troops and their families. Members of our military continue to make sacrifices and defend our nation. That's why the USO of Metropolitan Washington, Baltimore is committed to serving them throughout their years of service. USO Metro is the way for you to say thanks to our local military members, their families, and our wounded warriors and caregivers. Please visit us at usometro.org.
In this hyper-competitive marketplace, as a federal government contractor, now more than ever, you need to identify, track, forecast, and analyze opportunities that will help you grow your company by better positioning yourself to win contracts. I'm Jamie Brett, the founder of Easy GovOps, and that's our mission. Utilizing the most intuitive market intelligence platform, Easy GovOps, enables contractors of all sizes to manage their pipeline, collaborate, and team like never before. Experience for yourself the power available to you and your team with a 5-day free trial period with no commitment necessary to begin. Simply visit easygovops.com to start your free trial today. Join the hundreds of other federal government contractors who are enjoying the ultimate competitive advantage of our unequaled market intelligence. Just spend one free week at easygovops.com and see for yourself.
We're back now for some final thoughts. So if you had one piece of advice, one thought you want to give our TV audience, what would it be, Keith?
So I think a key takeaway from this discussion is, our federal partners, and especially the federal law enforcement agencies, need innovation. They need ideas and tools to help them perform their mission at the very best. And we're doing that in cheaper, faster, better ways every day. And I think ultimately, the key takeaway is that the taxpayer, the citizen, wins.
Citizen wins. Okay, Kay, your takeaway.
My takeaway, as I said before, is probably, I think the focus is going to be on biometrics in the future for law enforcement technology. I think you're going to see, even at the field level, at a traffic stop, you're going to see some sort of biometric, either a fingerprint, an iris scan. I just think that's the way of the future.
Joe, why don't you give us your final thought?
Well, I think it's important to know your customer and know your market. I know that's a statement that's often tossed around, but what it really means is to know your customer's mission requirements better than they do in terms of what the future opportunities, what the future capabilities hold from a technological standpoint, better than they understand it, and educate them. Then you become that valued partner that becomes indispensable to their mission.
Now, we're at that point of the time in our show where we like to hear from our viewers. So I'm going to now turn it over to Richard Nathan, President and CEO of AOC Key Solutions, and he's going to talk to us about the Government Contracting Weekly Mailbag. Richard.
Good morning. A viewer wants to know if the government reasonably expects a severely page-limited proposal to address all SOW elements, even if the SOW contains hundreds of work elements. Well, yes, they do. Next question? Seriously, yes, they do, but they don't want or expect the detail that compliance-focused offerers often think they need to provide. Some people obsess about telling the government everything they know about a subject and showing how smart they are. But when the government severely limits the page allocation, they're telling the offerers that they want a high-level discussion, perhaps at the second WBS level rather than a detailed explanation at the fourth or fifth level. They're also challenging the offerer to simplify the answer by synthesizing and integrating in a way that suitably explains their approach without drowning the reader in unwanted pages of detail. But if you insist on providing detail, consider putting your approach in a table where you don't have to be syntactically complete and worry about the style of your prose. Key Solutions is here to help you win or retain your next contract. If you have a question, please visit us at governmentcontractingweekly.com and click on Inquiries at the top of the page.
I believe that this has been a really important discussion, and that for all of the reasons noted, the area of law enforcement will become an even greater area of opportunity for the government contracting industry. I want to thank our outstanding panel for joining me today, starting with Joe Trindal, Chief Operation Officer of Akal. Joe, thank you very much. And then, of course, Kay Stephenson, the co-founder and president CEO of Datamaxx Group. Thank you, Kay.
Thank you
very much. We enjoyed it very much. And, of course, Keith Bryars, the client executive from Harris Corporation. Thank you again, Keith.
Thank you, sir.
And thank you all. But most importantly, I want to thank you, our viewers, because you once again made Government Contracting Weekly a regular part of your learning regimen. Now, on behalf of all my colleagues at Key Solutions, I'm Jim McCarthy, and I'll see you next week.
You've been watching Government Contracting Weekly, sponsored each week by AOC Key Solutions Incorporated. Government Contracting Weekly is the only television program devoted exclusively to the competitive and dynamic world of government contracting. For additional information, comments, questions, or suggestions, please write us at governmentcontractingweekly.com.